All right. Good evening. I would like to call to order the November 21st, 2022 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Please let the record reflect that all board members are present, as well as our 2 student representatives. The board values our public's participation and engagement in the meetings of the board. Also, board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the LWSD website. You are always welcome to email any individual board member or all of us at boardmembers@lwsd.org. So to begin this evening, we'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I'm going to pass this over to Director Carlson.
So it's been our privilege and our somewhat slow duty to bring ourselves up to date on this. And I just want to briefly mention that the first thing that we did was to reach out to our local tribal groups who reminded us that this is not their job. This is our job to draft a land acknowledgement. And so with that stated, this is not something that was solicited from the tribes for us to say. This is rather us trying to say something to and for the tribes. So the Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District acknowledges that our district is on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples, who have reserved treaty rights on this land, including the Duwamish and the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived here since time immemorial. We commit to continue collaborating with our Native community to teach the indigenous history of this land and these local tribes to all children of the district. We also commit to provide the best possible education for all children of Native descent who attend our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will now entertain a motion to approve the November 21st, 2022 agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Carlson to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So the next item on our agenda is public comment. The Board of Directors of the Lake Washington School District welcomes the public to the business meetings of the board and encourages community engagement. The board dedicates 30 minutes at these meetings to hear from public during a public comment period. With the return to in-person meetings, we have updated the process to sign up for public comments. Please go to our website to sign up to participate by noon on the day of the board meeting. Comments will be offered in the order of sign up, beginning with speakers in person, followed by virtual, and concluding with written comments as time allows. So the first individual that I do have signed up this evening is Norm Seabrooks. If you'd like to come forward to the microphone and the podium up front and just state your name for the record, that would be great.
And thank you for the invitation. I truly appreciate the honor of addressing the board. I am a new trustee of Cascadia College. And during our last couple of meetings, we talked a great deal about the need for Cascadia and its board members to open or to begin a conversation with the school districts that we serve. It is our hope that as a trustee, attending your monthly board meetings, I can convey to you and to your students and your administration how important you are to Cascadia and how important you are to our understanding of how we can serve you better by getting information to Cascadia on what your needs are. Our president, Eric Murray, has offered to meet with the board and with his and to bring along his administration to discuss what Cascadia is doing. For example, we're opening a new classroom in Redmond that's going to be open to Running Start students and other programs. They're building a new STEM building out on campus that will open next fall. They're also offering, as a part of their desire to serve the community, a new computer science program that was enacted by the legislative body recently. 95% of the students who apply or complete 2 years at Cascadia College and apply to UW gain admission because of the close working relationship we have with the UW at the Bothell campus. More importantly, 1/3 of the Cascadia students are from the Running Start program. And the intent that I've seen in my short time on that board is to make sure we do a very good job serving not only the communities that fall within the jurisdiction of Lake Washington, but all the communities, in our service area, in giving them the programs they need, making sure that the students, the school boards, the administrations are getting what they want from us, not simply offering them a chance to attend the school without having input in the course curriculum, and making sure that we are giving back. So again, Eric and his administration are willing to come meet with the school board and the administration and the district at any point in time to discuss how Lake Washington can, how Cascadia can help serve Lake Washington. I will tell you that this is my hometown. I've been here for 20 years. My wife, Susan, has been involved with the Lake Washington School District 15 years. And tonight she pointed out as I was leaving that I'm not wearing a Cascadia sweatshirt. So I will apologize for that, but the next time I show up, I will have a Cascadia sweatshirt on. Thank you very much for allowing me the few minutes. And again, if there's one thing I want to convey, it is how committed Cascadia is to being a good partner with all of the school districts, especially the ones that serve this community, because it has been my home for 20 years, and I'm looking forward to attending your monthly meetings and just participating as much as I can to help grow that relationship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the next individual I have signed up for public comments, I don't have the list right in front of me right this second, is Dave Moore. Wonderful. Yeah, if you just step forward and tell us your name, and you have about 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you. My name is Dave Moore. I'm the parent of an international community school senior who has been at that school since 2016. My wife and I consider ourselves incredibly lucky that our son was near the top of the choice lottery in his year because we believed in the school's high standards, continuity from middle through high school, and focus on classical humanities and international studies. We made a deliberate choice out of 2 choice schools that we qualified for to join ICS, and then recommitted to remain enrolled through his upper grades. Focus Week, in which the students spend a week in spring on a teacher-led activity, was a large part of that decision. When we joined, it included options for travel learning, including US and international trips. And our son was lucky enough to go on one of those trips in 8th grade, and it was a character-changing experience for him. I am speaking today to protest Principal Kinney's decision, which we learned of 6 p.m. on Friday, to cut travel from Focus Week without soliciting parent input or without giving us enough time to develop alternatives that would work for this school year. I'm asking if the board had anything to do with this decision. If it did, I would ask you to reconsider. If not, I am asking for your help. Making this change mid-year is profoundly unfair. Further, if this decision has been hanging in the background and published now, based on policy changes that give parents little time to develop options and work with the school to find a solution, it was dishonest. It is, in my opinion, a failure of leadership to provide first notice of this decision on Friday evening before the Thanksgiving holiday. It is hard to see that as anything other than an attempt to bury the news. We stuck with this school through COVID, through science curriculum problems last year, put in our volunteer hours, and supported the school with the expectation that ICS would return to form. I can only imagine how the parents of a 6th grader or a 9th grader who just made a fresh commitment to the school would feel about this. I believe we would have left the school. I think there is still time to correct this. Over the weekend, nothing in the last 6.5 years that we've been involved with the school has stirred up so much immediate parental energy. I would suggest that there's time to engage with the parents to assemble something resembling a normal year for the International Community School. And at a minimum, committing to making changes at a point in which parents can make an informed decision to remain or leave ICS. So my family is asking for the school board's support on this matter, and I will follow up via email with our district representative, who I believe is Dr. Carlson. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'd just like to follow up with that the board did become aware of these concerns earlier in the day and has asked the superintendent to just follow up on this matter to figure out sort of the situation. Is there anything you'd like to add, or?
Nothing to add at this time, but we have staff that will follow up with you. Thank you.
All right, we do have a written comment that has been included with the board notes that you can then read there as well on school safety, I believe. All right, so our next item on the agenda is the approval of the November 21st, 2022 consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
It has been moved by Director Stewart and seconded by Director Carlson to approve the consent agenda. Dr. Holman, will you pull the board?
Director La Liberty,
Yes.
Director Stewart,
Yes.
Director Carlson,
Yes.
Vice President Choi,
Yes.
and President Bleasner.
Yes. All right, so our next item on the agenda, I have to open up my agenda, is the approval of the 2022-23 Lake Washington School District legislative priorities. Dr. Holman, would you like to introduce that?
I would, and coming to the presentation podium is Associate Superintendent Barbara Posthumus. As the board knows, we've been evaluating various legislative priorities over the past month to 6 weeks, looking at the different agencies across the state that focus on preschool through high school education, and just the different legislative platforms and issues that different agencies are putting forward. We reviewed the WASDA priorities that were being set and had a discussion, actually had multiple discussions in study session around the board's values and priorities, which led to the compilation of a one-pager, which then turns into what we hope is really a communication tool set for all of us to use as we move into this legislative session, knowing that this is a long session, meaning it's a budget year as they develop a 2-year biennium budget. There's a number of highly impactful issues that the legislature will be considering during this session. And so this platform is put forward knowing that it isn't the scope of everything that we think about and everything that we focus on, but these are some of the highest priority leverage items as we think about this legislative session moving forward. And so Associate Superintendent Posthumus will walk through the platform. In your agenda is a copy of the one-page platform document. And Barbara?
Okay, thank you very much. And as Dr. Holman stated, each year you, as the Board of Directors, develop this platform. It is our areas of priority and focus, knowing there are lots of areas that we want to focus on. And then once this platform is adopted, we begin to meet with our legislators. We're beginning to set up those meetings and we'll meeting with them prior to the session or just as the session begins to share our priorities with them. These priorities are aligned with the mission and vision and board values as stated in your policies. And again, they focus on our students because that's what's most important. So you're going to see lots of smiling faces in this presentation. So the first priority area of focus is special education. So I'll kind of walk through some of the data we have around that and the priority areas. So this slide shows the history of our funding. The blue bar represents state revenue. The green bar represents federal revenue, and the kind of light pink or orange on the screen represents the revenue shortfall. So special education costs represent over $72 million of the district budget, and the state and federal dollars only cover a portion of these costs. The legislature first provided significant additional investments in the 2018-19 school year through McCleary, and then they also updated the Safety Net Award, which you can see reduced the shortfall in 18-19. They provided some small increases in 2019, increasing the multiplier. It was about $1 million in extra funding. They also increased access to safety net funds by lowering the threshold to access those funds. And as I'll share in a future slide, but the threshold continues to increase back again, which reduces what we can collect. And you'll also see that our funding shortfall of 22 million this year is really back to pre-McCleary levels. So costs continue to rise, and fully funding special education should continue to be a top priority for our legislator. So this slide, again, our interest is aligning funding with inclusionary practices. You heard a great discussion about that in our study session, so we want to make sure our schools are funded to properly implement that. As I mentioned, the funding factor was increased slightly. We're requesting for that funding factor to continue to be increased. And to simplify and streamline the safety net process for high-cost students. We are required to annually apply to the state for any student that kind of is above average in costs, and then they review each and every one of those applications and then provide us what they call a safety net fund. Some of those funds come from the state, some come from federal dollars. So last year, our Special Services Department submitted applications related to 223 students, and those are individual packets that must be produced. So 223 individual packets must be produced, and that is duplicated across the state in every district, and then that information is submitted to OSPI for review. Those students cost an average of $74,000 per student. Our state funding, the federal state basic ed plus special ed plus federal is about $21,000, so a $53,000 gap. And the state sets that threshold that I was talking about, that they fund safety net, at actually 35 million. So there's even a gap between the revenue we receive, the minimum threshold that they will fund high-cost students at, and so that also, that was that lowering the threshold I talked to you about that they did earlier, but then they raised it again. We should be really getting $3 million more in safety net funding if that threshold was what our actual revenues were. So a lot of numbers that I'm throwing out, but bottom line, we are requesting, it's a very labor-intensive process to get another $9.1 million from the state, which we are absolutely grateful for. And we submit for 9.1, we actually receive about 8.7 because of they don't accept everything we ask for. So the second area of focus is construction funding, and the first part of that is implementing the simple majority for school bonds. We have had rapid growth in this district. We grew 33% from 2008 through 2019. And so we need a constitutional amendment to allow simple majority for bonds. That you can see the last 5 bonds that we have not been able to, out of 5 bond measures that we've put before our voters, only 1 bond measure received 60% approval needed to pass. Our district currently has 162 portables, or the equivalent of 5 elementary schools. So over a decade ago in 2007, the legislature approved a constitutional amendment to authorize a simple majority for school levies, or EP&O levies. But more than a decade later, we're still struggling with that for bonds. Last session, there was a HJR 4200, a bill that was proposed, but it did not get forwarded. So continue to need support in that area. So this second part of construction is increasing the school construction funding. We receive funding from the state on rebuilding aging schools, but no funding for new schools. So, and when we do get funding from the state, they only give us about $65 per square feet, and the average construction cost is $450 to $525 square feet and rising. And again, there's been no meaningful movement on changes to the construction funding formula since 2005. So the other area is prioritizing funding for sustainable design and construction of school buildings. Now, we do design and construct our schools in accordance to the Washington Sustainable School Design Protocol. That's a LEED, sorry, I didn't pronounce that, LEED silver standard. So we do that, but the legislature recently, in the 2019 biennium, passed a bill that requires clean building performance standards, and they didn't fund any of those requirements. So again, the ensuring that they're supporting and funding sustainable design and construction. So the third area of focus is transportation, and I'll go over. So again, we want the state to fully fund the cost of transportation. Right now, they only fund 84% of our transportation budget. We have a $14.6 million transportation budget, and we have a gap of $2.3 million in that budget. We also requesting that the funding formula known as STARS, which is the Student Transportation Allocation Reporting System, which was implemented in 2011, be updated so that it's more transparent and predictable. Right now, the formula is a regression formula that relies on a statistical method to create, which creates relationships between multiple variables. But because of that, districts are not able to model it internally. So I can model many of our other funding, state funding formulas. The transportation one is we aren't able to model. So therefore, we aren't able to estimate what our transportation revenues or how changes impact those revenues. So we're asking for an update to that. The other piece of that is sustainable, adding to our sustainability focus is electric school buses. So we have applied for multiple state and federal grants for electric school buses, and that's just to fund 1, 2, or 3 buses, but we have not been awarded those grants due to the qualification criteria that the agency set out. And the cost of purchasing electric buses and infrastructure significantly exceeds what the state actually funds us right now through depreciation. So the last area of focus is staffing. And so I'll be talking about the prototypical model. And again, the prototypical school model is a staffing allocation model that the state, our enrollment drives a staffing formula, which is developed, the prototypical school model, and then that drives funding levels. So that prototypical model was implemented in 2011, but the funding levels kind of remain the same. In 2014, an initiative was approved to provide increases to staffing allocations, but in 2007, McCleary repealed that implementation. And then in 2019, a staffing enrichment work group submitted a report providing for a phase-in of the prototypical model. And those recommendations included additional physical, social, and emotional support staff, additional school administration, principals, and increases to other staffing levels, and additional professional development support and coaches. So the good news was that in the last year, in the last legislative session, the state did provide funding increases to a portion of the prototypical model for social, for physical, social, and emotional support. This is a slide we shared with you last year of, again, the blue part is the state funding, the orange part is the unfunded portion or the shortfall, what's locally funded. So the, and the left represents dollars and the right represents staff FTE, full-time equivalent. The funding was over a 3-year period. So the legislature funded additional funding for the 22-23 school year. And again, that's funds the district is already spending. It's just filling that gap of what we were already spending. And then should the legislature continue that implementation, there's a potential of that funding level still not meeting what we're actually already spending as a district, but again, providing some additional funding. So the legislative platform really talks about, again, continuing to look at that prototypical model and fund what it really takes to run a school district and to support student learning and programs. So we hire over 190 certificated and classified staff that the state does not currently fund. And that's really just looking at our basic ed, regular education. That does not include special education, that does not include multilingual, so other kind of partially state-funded programs, that isn't included in those numbers. The substitutes is another area of where there's a significant funding gap. The state only funds 12.2% of substitute and leave costs. So there's a gap right now of, out of our $7 million that we spend, the state only funds $900,000, and so we have to fund $6.1 million of those costs. There's a small state formula that funds 4 days for certificated instructional staff, 4 substitute days, but the amount they fund per day is significantly less than what it actually costs to pay a sub for a day. And they only fund certificated staff. They haven't even acknowledged that we need substitutes for our classified staff as well. So we're asking for additional support for that. The other piece, the third area, is compensation changes. When compensation changes are made at the state level, we districts are impacted due to the funding gap between what the state funds and what programs and services actually cost. So, for example, last year when the state implemented a 5.5% IPD or COLA, for every 1% of that IPD, it costs us about $1 to $1.5 million of local funding. So it cost us over $6 million in local funding last year, and our levy dollars don't increase. They're limited, they're capped at a certain amount. So in order to find that $6 million, that has to come from programs and services. So just to summarize, our platform topics include fully funding special education, implementing simple majority for school bonds, increasing school construction funding, fully fund the cost of transportation, increasing in transparency and predictability in transportation, update prototypical funding model, and increase funding for substitutes. So next steps is the board will take formal action tonight on the proposed legislative platform.
A couple other points I want to make just about the platform that the board saw previously and what's in front of you tonight. You saw that we embedded concepts around sustainability in both the construction and the transportation area. Previously, we had the construction funding listed as simple majority, but just given the various topics within that, felt like it made more sense to categorize that as construction funding, even though we had a discussion about which way we should go, and we went with simple majority. And so it's in front of you tonight, proposed as construction funding. I also want to point out that McCleary, the point of McCleary was for the state to fund basic education. Special education is defined by the state as basic education. And as we put a platform like this forward, that's a very key point in all of this, that the state claims that they are fully funding basic education, yet you saw on the slide deck tonight, we continue to have $22 million that come out of our local levy funds, which is our enrichment levy for student programs and services, paying for a large portion of basic education. We also added a bullet point under staffing around compensation, knowing that there's a very substantial compensation recommendation that a committee recommended to OSPI, OSPI then recommended to the legislature. And for me, it's not about any one of the recommendations, it's about connecting all of the dots from OSPI or from the legislature, and actually being thoughtful around not impacting local levy dollars for local school districts. Because every time they pull a lever that has an impact on local levy dollars, it reduces our ability to do what we've said to our community, and those are the reasons that they say yes to our educational programs and operations levies. So that's why that was added after much thought and consideration. It was worded specifically because it's not about any one of the recommendations, yes or no. It's about really a comprehensive look at them overall and the downstream impact that every school district in the state of Washington are going to experience if those recommendations are adopted as is.
And can I just add one more? There's a statement also at the bottom of the priority that says, implement the statute that requires a full fiscal impact statement and funding for all legislation that affects school districts. So many times our legislators pass these, what they feel as inconsequential bills and to require school districts to do things, and they don't fund the actual impact of that. So school districts have to take on more and more that is not funded. And so that's the other overall request, is to make sure they're identifying the impact to all the bills that they consider and then fund them.
Any questions? Director Stewart?
Barbara, not at this time, but could you send us a list of the hurdles, I guess, if you would, that you encountered on trying to get the grants for the electric buses? I'd be curious to see what it is that they've put as almost a barrier, if you will, and because I'm wondering if perhaps even our state, our federal delegation has any concept of what those barriers are to having us get environmentally responsible transportation in a state that puts that at such a high priority.
Yeah, we can get that to you. And you can also see our statement around funding of electric vehicles. We actually target 2030, and that was purposeful because Governor Inslee just signed into law that 2030 is the benchmark for gasoline vehicles no longer to be sold in the state of Washington. So it makes logical sense that if that's a direction we're going to go for that's a benchmark that we can target as well in terms of when our bus fleets should be well on their way to being electrified.
I was quickly looking to see if we had any members of our delegation on the Transportation Commission or committees. I haven't seen it yet, but I think that'd be something that they would be very highly interested in.
Any other questions? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I move approval of the 2023 legislative priorities as presented tonight.
Second.
It has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Choi to approve the legislative priorities as put forward. Is there any discussion? Director La Liberty?
I just want to thank Barbara for the presentation tonight and also recognize a large amount of work that went into this before tonight too. We've had lengthy study sessions on this work, and it's no small matter to pull a lot of information into a coherent set of priorities, and I think we've accomplished that. So thank you.
Director Choi?
I echo that sentiment. Thank you so much for the work. And I would also like to just say that it's really exciting for me to see that there are things that we want to work towards in this, specifically the work around the sustainability efforts in construction and our transportation, and to see that in conjunction with the things that still need to get done, that are still priorities for our district, but then also looking forward and looking at that picture together is pretty exciting. So thank you.
Director Stewart?
Yes, I really appreciate it. I understand that this is pretty much a big numbers game when you get down to it, but convincing legislators by just giving them numbers is only part of the battle. And that may win their mind, but it won't win their hearts. And I'd love for every number we have, or for every statement of numbers we have student stories to correspond them, because that's going to really switch the folks to our camp.
All right, so I would just like to say I support the legislative priorities we put forward, but second what Director Choi said, that it's great to see the items incorporated that we had talked about in sustainability and really targeted, that you look to see what was coming down the pike. It helps to make the board be able to have a clear story when we go out to speak as well. So thank you for having this good tool. I'd also like to just recognize that this is one part of the whole concept that has been talking about, that the whole back piece will also be given, so if there's further information required, it will be there. And so thank you to the board for the work in going forward and doing the priorities, the delegate assembly, and all those other components that help to feed into this information. Any other further discussion? Yeah, go ahead.
I realize this part of the discussion is not about me. I do actually want to recognize our student reps, Shivani and Evan, and just want to thank you for your voice in this process as well. I hope you see your input in this as well, because you were key players in these conversations all along. And so really appreciated the anecdotes, stories, and direct feedback around this platform and these ideas to help it become, to me, what is a very powerful legislative platform that we get to move forward with. So just want to appreciate your thoughts on this as well.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will have a vote. All those in favor of approving the legislative priorities as put forward, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, and look forward to further information as we go forward with the additional work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next items on our agenda will start our process with monitoring reports, just to sort of give you a summary of where we're going. Our first two items will be doing reasonable indicators, just discussing some of the changes to indicators interpretations. Then we'll do the monitoring reports, actually, for OE 5, 6, and 7, and then we'll do the summaries for OE 9, and finally for OE 14. It has been finished. So that's sort of the evening for tonight of where the rest of the agenda goes. So we'll be starting with OE 4, which is treatment of staff. And this is for the reasonable interpretation and indicators. So Dr. Holman, I will send this to you.
Great, and this is OE4 Personnel Administration.
Different title.
But it's okay. And so tonight we bring to you, in both your packet electronically and in hard copy, we have some recommendations for policy, interpretation, and indicator updates. Some of this is feedback from the board that we received. Some of this was, as I worked with staff, just some different concepts we wanted to bring forward to the board tonight. And so I want to start with 4.3, and I'm wondering, would it be better if I just pulled the board docs view up to walk through it from the,
Yep.
so I'll just move down for the evening. Okay, so we have 4.3, which previously reads, ensure recruitment and retention practices that are equitable to support a diverse workforce that is representative of community and of the community and student body. And in terms of working with staff, hearing from the board, we really wanted to think about two things. One, the board has expressed an interest of increasing the diversity of staff racially, but other ways as well. And so capturing that as support of a diverse workforce. We also know that in order to ensure that, it does need to be equitable recruitment and retention practices, but as we thought about it, it's also the hiring practices as well. So the new recommended policy statement is ensure equitable recruitment, hiring, and retention practices that support a diverse workforce as the overarching value that the board is putting forward. In terms of interpretation, you can see previously there was a very narrowly defined interpretation, and so we broadened that interpretation to make sure that we were capturing all of those components. I'm not going to read each of those pieces, but you can see here as we interpret diverse, you can see its race and other forms of identity. As we talk about equitable recruitment, it's practices that are intentional, using both traditional and non-traditional means of recruitment. Equitable hiring, practices that provide clear and consistent processes and procedures as we go through that. And in terms of equitable retention practices, it's practices that foster employee retention through intentional supports for staff with emphasis on historically marginalized populations. And that can be, again, a number of areas of diversity as we think about race and other forms of identity. And so we went this direction because, as we've shared with the board, there's a number of different data sets that just aren't available from staff. Staff would need to opt in to offering some of that data, and we know that anytime that we have opt-in, and some of our surveys are opt-in, that we may not get a full set of data from our staff, and so that's how we interpret it, which then leads into the indicators. And just as kind of a broad set, number one, continuing to provide those data that are available consistently around our staff, but we've really looked more at what are the guaranteed practices and conditions that are in place that lead to equitable recruitment, hiring, and retention of staff, with a theory of action being that if we have these practices in place, that these are the things that lead to staff having the experiences we want. And so the recommended indicators around recruitment and hiring, first, the district maintains and reviews a comprehensive recruitment strategy. Second, that the district has specific outreach programs to target candidates from various educational and socioeconomic backgrounds. And the district has specific hiring practices to reduce bias in hiring. Regarding retention, the district has an established process to request workplace accommodations. Second, the district has established an employee assistance program. Next, that the district maintains and reviews established leave procedures such as family, maternity, military, caregiver, and religious types. And finally, the district uses qualitative and quantitative staff data to inform staff training related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's 4.3, and so I want to pause there and see if there's any questions from the board.
Director Carlson?
So structurally, the indicator of compliance that's been replaced was the district demonstrates increasing diversity in race, ethnicity in all work categories of the workforce using reportable data. And while I appreciate the point of trying to have things around our strategies to achieve a diverse workforce, what I don't see in these indicators is any measure of do we have a diverse workforce. And I'm not particularly comfortable removing that from 4.3 unless it went in somewhere else.
That's a great point, and thank you for bringing that up. I think one thing is continuing to report those data is part of ensuring a diverse workforce. Operational expectation 14 goes in much greater depth around the diversity of our staff, which, as we think about these two different policies, and not trying to duplicate data sets as much as possible, that's the other place that it resides. In the cycle of our monitoring, it appears that OE14 will be monitored probably the first in our monitoring cycle, end of September, beginning of October, with OE4 coming later in the series. So you would have that data prior to this being monitored.
I could work with that. I'm curious about where the rest of my colleagues are.
I had the same comment you did, that I was concerned we were losing that piece. It would be good, at least as a minimum, that it is referenced within this indicator, that the diversity information is available in OE 14 and which table that is. Then there's at least the connection back between them.
I'm,
I was about to say Director Choi, then
Oh,
Director La Liberty, but I didn't say it first. I'm sorry.
So I know we had a conversation when we were monitoring OA4 about in the sub-policy, when we specifically reference diverse workforce that is representative of the community and the student body, because our community and student body are ever changing, right? And I understand the intent there after that conversation to move it to support a diverse workforce. And maybe this is another link to our OE14 policy then, but that can be interpreted in multiple ways. You can make an argument that that we are already diverse, exactly, that we no longer have to attempt to diversify further, because you could say that we have a diverse workforce right now. So that's
I
just
may-
my only concern there.
The interpretation of diverse, however, incorporates multiple categories there.
It does, but not to, it doesn't specify the extent.
It doesn't benchmark against our community. That's been lost.
And we talk about the challenge of benchmarking against the community for the limitations in which it can provide in and of itself as well.
But I think you could argue that we are in compliance with this, but that is not the intent of where we're trying to get.
This is one of those interesting challenges where we need to state we want a diverse workforce without putting a line in the sand on where does diverse begin or end is a problem. And I've always been uncomfortable with saying that we have to perfectly match our student body simply because the student body moves much faster than staff will. It will always be behind whatever our demographics are in the district. But nonetheless, that it's moving closer to representative is something that diverse by itself doesn't say it's moving towards some goal. When do we know we're diverse enough? Is there, yeah. And when do we, because right now I get the feeling that what we're talking about is that our teachers are much more likely to look like me than they are any other ethnicity or racial group in the district. And yet I come from the most rapidly decreasing group in the district for students. And so this is something where I do very much hear and support the notion that somehow I'd like to retain the notion that it's representative of our community and our students.
Director La Liberty.
Okay, I went back and just double checked OE 14 to make sure this was covered. And OE and 14.6, so this is our equity policy for those at home, is ensure a highly qualified and diverse workforce through strategic recruitment, hiring, retention practices. And the particular report, yes, and the particular report outs on what does our diversity look like, and many of the things that my colleagues on the board have raised tonight are captured in there. And when I think about where do I want to monitor that as a board member? Do I want to monitor it as part of OE 14, or do I want to monitor it as part of personnel administration? I think it falls more appropriately in the equity policy in terms of what we're trying to accomplish in that, what we talked about when we enacted that policy, and what we're trying to accomplish in that policy as a whole. And whereas in OE 4, I view that policy more as focused on, I'm having a hard time grabbing the words here. Yeah, the procedural, thank you, Director Carlson. The procedural, Director Carlson just helped me out there quite helpfully. The procedural parts of running a district and personnel. And I think that these changes to 4.3 are more in line with that intent of the policy. So it is a little scary seeing that indicator removed from a policy because it makes it seem as though it's something we don't care about, we're not monitoring. But that's not the case, and that's why we enacted OE 14, is to have that focused attention on that policy. on that indicator as part of equity. So all that rambling to say I'm perfectly comfortable with these proposed changes. And
So the only thing I would respond to that is, I would argue that when you're trying to enact systemic change, that you cannot say, this is the procedure and therefore we do not need to address issues of increasing diversity and equity in our system. This is, I would argue, the place that you should have it, because at some point, if we determine, or future board leaders or superintendents determine that our equity policy is done, right, that we've achieved, then it will be lost. You will only have the procedures, the standards.
So Director Stewart first, I believe you had something. Nope. Okay. Director Carlson?
Yeah, okay. I'm with you on that, absolutely. And I can find a middle way here, because this does turn out to be something where I like the notion of having procedure separate from the target objectives, but we need to link them. And just as with the previous conversation, here, when we're talking about, even at the superintendent's interpretation, you're interpreting what does a diverse workforce mean, and then with a footnote, the diversity of the workforce will be monitored as part of OE blank, just pointing out that that will always be somewhere else, so that we've got a paper trail to follow on where the data is, rather than having to remember where the data is, because that sort of memory eventually expires when someone leaves the board.
that sounds like a good idea to me.
Does that seem to fit? Dr. Holman?
I'm just making sure I'm taking notes correctly. Yes, it does make sense.
So if I was following, the idea is that it would stay the way it's currently revised, adding it to a link that for the diversity component of staff that will be monitored in OE 14.6.
And another piece about OE 14, and maybe you said this, Director Laliberty, I just missed it. It's about the increasing diversity of the workforce in OE 14. One of the problems that trying to mirror the student body is that because we have a number of, if we just take racial diversity, we have a number of, if you will, categories of race that don't have high representation in our student body, but we would actually like to see greater representation, because that's actually good for all of our students to see and experience teachers from different racial backgrounds. And so that's kind of the theory behind why we walked away from that, and because the board had a different value stated in OE 14 around increasing diversity and chose not to mirror this language in OE 14 around mirroring the student body and staff makeup.
I think the solution might be to just add that same word here to support an increasingly diverse workforce, potentially.
That was going to be my suggestion as well.
So that would be in regards to 14.3. It would be
4.3.
4.3, sorry. Ensure equitable recruitment, hiring, and retention practices that support an increasingly diverse workforce.
So the add would be changing the word "a" to "an" and adding the word "increasingly."
Yes.
I'm saying that specifically because if the board takes action tonight, I want you to know what I'm documenting here, so that you're, so the policy would read the policy statement. And remember, the policy statement is the board's value. And so you get to decide whatever you want that value statement to be. It says ensure equitable recruitment, hiring, and retention practices that support an increasingly diverse workforce.
Which will then have to roll into the interpretation as well.
Correct.
And that's where the interpretation piece pointing to where is the increasingly data works in nicely.
Yes, because I don't have OE 14 in front of me. Well, actually, I probably do, but it's a few tabs away. My guess is we have defined increasingly diverse in OE 14. And so in the interpretation, I just, again, to be specific, I'll make a statement, something like the measurement of diversity and stated targets are measured in OE 14. Okay.
The specific sub-policy, if you can.
Yes.
Director Stewart?
Yeah, I want to make sure too that as we talk about increasingly, and I don't want to see us saying, well, gee, we're doing it increasingly because it went up 0.02, went up 0.01. That's going to look flat to me. I mean, it has to be a meaningful increase, to be quite frank. I realize that takes time, but at the same time, if it looks flat for 10 years, it's going to look flat for 10 years, regardless if it's going up increasingly 0.1, 0.2, 0.1. See where I'm going, John?
I do, and I think that's where multiple data elements actually can inform the board in evaluating it. Because part of it is the overall, that's where you're going to see that really kind of very small gains over time. So it's looking at both our hiring. So if our hiring diversity isn't outpacing our overall, we'll never reach or see any growth, but also our retention data. Like all of that put together is for the board to evaluate compliance.
Thank you.
Any other questions on 4.3? So we have a few revisions with that, I think that were agreed to. I know we're not correctly at the motion stage, but I think we can document that when we make the motion, okay?
The next area is 4.7. So let me scroll down there. And so again, trying to really narrow in on the board's value statement. So you can see what the policy statement was previously, proposing that the policy states assure compensation and working conditions that attract and retain high-quality employees. Sorry, just documenting that I left the word "that" out. And so you can see here it removes a couple of components. One, it removes benefit plans. With the adoption of SEB a few years back, benefits are by and large consistent across all 295 school districts, and our offering of supplemental benefits are almost eliminated. And so it really isn't a great point of evaluation for the board. We also identified, or we removed comparison because we aren't able to do market comparisons when we think about benefit plans, thinking about compensation that goes beyond our state and things like that. And so just trying to be very succinct about the board's value and policy statement. The interpretation of that, you can see, goes into previously we had compensation, working conditions, applicable marketplace, and organizations. And so interpreting compensation to mean district salaries, which are evaluated based on comprehensive market, regional market analysis of select school districts, working conditions to mean stated parameters and expectations for each specific job type, and narrowing in on high-quality employees to mean staff that meet and exceed standards of conduct and performance. Leading then to indicators. First indicator stays by and large the same, with the change being at the end, or maintaining and within budget parameters. And then you can see two new indicators. Job descriptions are maintained to accurately reflect required work duties and responsibilities, and that retention of staff maintains current levels or increases over a 5-year period. As you remember, as we talked about retention rates, previously we talked about how can we compare these to other organizations. There is not a body of data around K-12 retention, and there really hasn't been substantive studies. And so trying to think about how can we relate our own internal data for the board to evaluate it, and that's why it was the maintenance of or increase for a couple of reasons. One, right now we only have 3 years of really high quality data, and so we don't know, is our data, is it good? Is it out of alignment with prior years and prior sets of 5-year periods? We just had COVID, that we know that affected. We also know that our data, when we look at the breakdown of our demographics, we know that in particular our Black African American and Hispanic Latino staff over a 3-year period, we actually saw that they had a lower retention rate than our other racial groups. And so those are things we want to pay attention to. We're not sure we have enough information to set a standard or a target yet, and that's something that we can do over time, but thought this was a good indicator to start with. So that's 4.7.
Any questions? Director Stewart.
John, you said that SEB basically has pretty much homogenized benefit packages across the board. Does it specifically prohibit supplementary benefits?
It does. It limits the supplementary benefits that school districts can offer.
Okay, all right.
Director Troy.
Under the indicators, I think it might be, where was it? Yes, under the first indicator, when it says which are district salaries, which are evaluated based on a comprehensive regional market analysis of select school districts, comparable school districts, potentially. Select kind of implies you can pick and choose, and it doesn't necessarily, like, you can pick any school district if you wanted to compare a district salary to versus a comparable school district.
So are you under the interpretation?
Interpretation.
Yep. Comparable. So remove select, add comparable. Thank you.
Any other questions? Clarifications, okay, so we have 2 amendments moving forward. Good. Likely Eric's keeping track, it's 3.
Okay, 4.10. And here we really just, in the policy, removed attracts and retains. We felt like that was addressed already up above. I believe that was 4.3 around just the whole recruitment, hiring, retention. I believe that's better left in a single policy component. And then you can see under indicators, removed one of the pieces around the annual district and school survey, and then kind of played it out differently, that it's the percent of staff completing the annual program survey, and that's directly in relation to, we used that annual program survey as part of our ongoing strategic planning and planning for the upcoming school year. As you remember, we did listening sessions with every school last year. That was driven from the annual program survey that staff had just completed, and that really was our lead in to those conversations with staff.
So if I could just clarify, in the far left-hand column, it says 410 policy, and then that says 411 indicators.
Thank you.
If we can just confirm, because I think when I had watched those, that actually fell under 411.
I believe they do fall under 411. Thank you.
No, that's okay, because
Yes.
I highlighted it first, I thought they were the same. So 410 is the policy, and I don't believe there's any indicator changes with 410.
No, there aren't, in kind of a point of clarification. Thank you for reminding me of what I was looking at. The annual program survey is better related to 411. The annual staff survey, so kind of the climate survey type, is in 410, and that's left in there as an indicator.
And it's actually in 410 as what were the responses, not necessarily how many respondents. So the only change on 410 that you're speaking to is the removal of tracks, retains, and out of the
Correct.
policy. Any questions on that? Director La Liberty has one.
When we last monitored OE4, 4.10 was not in compliance because we had not completed the climate survey in the past year. At the time, there was discussion about bringing a new indicator to the board. So I guess there is no new indicator. So is there going to be a climate survey? Are we doing something different that falls under that? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so we'll do a climate survey.
Okay.
So when the board monitors this in, I believe, January is when this will be monitored. We will not have climate survey data. The next cycle, when the board monitors, will have climate survey data. So related to the 22-23 school year.
Okay. So the district climate survey will remain as an indicator.
Yes,
Okay. But in the next monitoring, we will not have the district climate survey.
in
Do I
the,
have-
in the present,
In the
present
present, yes,
monitoring.
sorry, thank you.
Yes,
And this coming, it's always like the this week, next week thing, I can never get straight. And the next time we see this year, there will not be district climate survey
Correct.
data. So we should expect that this would be marked as not in compliance, if that's the case?
correct.
Okay, got it, thank you.
And part of that is because of the cycle that we shifted from monitoring. Had we monitored in the same cycle, when OE4 is typically monitored in August,
That's right.
we would have had the 22-23 data to report in August. Because we moved it up, we have
Okay.
not had a cycle to implement a climate
Great.
survey.
And I expect you'll have to remind me of that again in January when this comes to us. So thank you in
I'd be
advance.
happy to do that.
Thank you in advance for that. When is the climate survey conducted?
It will be in spring
Okay,
of '23.
got it. I'll remember all these things.
Any questions or concerns with that policy change? All right, seeing none. And then 411, did you want to cover that as well? Any questions or concerns on that one?
Oh, sorry, can I say one thing on 4.10?
Absolutely.
We as a board had discussed this before and the importance of the organizational culture, and I appreciate the fine tuning of this to really focus this policy on this, because this is an interest for everyone in the district for this coming year. So I really appreciate the intentionality of focusing this policy. I think it's going to be very helpful for monitoring.
Thank you. Do you have anything additional you want to add to 411?
I do not.
Director Troy?
I think I would like a clarification of the first indicator for % of staff completing the annual program survey. What do you mean by % of staff?
So the annual program survey is available to all staff. So I believe the theory behind the indicator is because if someone has the policy in front of them, I believe the policy is related to input around, decisions affecting them. Is that a
Reasonably
fair
input.
summary?
You
Yes.
basically got to
Yep.
work
Okay,
forward. Yep.
and so if only, 5% of our staff are completing our annual program survey, and then we're taking that and saying, okay, we have staff input around decisions, to me, that is missing the point of attempting to elicit feedback from staff. And so that's how the % is related to the input that staff are providing.
So is there a way to clarify that so that's reflected in that statement? So a majority of staff complete, increasing?
You'd like to quantify it?
Yes.
Is there a benchmark that the board would feel comfortable with? I heard majority, that's 51% of our staff.
I think having some input or information about maybe past percentages of staff completing the survey would be helpful for us to benchmark.
So a couple directions we could go. One, we could pause on adopting all of this before we answer that question and bring it back at the December 5th meeting. We could set a percent now for monitoring and then bring that data back. And if the data tells us to update the indicator, then we do that post monitoring. So do that January, February to re-update the indicators. And I'm comfortable either way.
So I'm not sure so we could table the decision for tonight, so we have some changes that could come back with those changes as well as a potential percent quantified at the December 5th meeting. That's an option we can do. And typically with our policies, we do a first read and a second read. That is not uncommon. Due to our timeline on these reports, we're trying to move them just a little bit quicker so we can get them finalized. So that's one piece. Or we could make those approvals tonight and then it can just go through those amendments. Do you have a preference?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
On our work plan, we have this to monitor on December 5th. But then I also heard January just a minute ago, so what?
So it is likely that that will move to the January.
Okay. I don't have strong feelings on this, but I suppose, given that we have made changes tonight, just for clarity for all, it probably would make sense to bring it, I guess, on balance, my view would be to bring the whole thing back on December 5th.
With the discussions and changes that we've made.
Correct.
Dr. Carlson looks like he has a question he wants to say.
Can we bring it back in consent rather than reopen the?
Absolutely. It could come back on consent just to confirm that it's there with what we want for
Then I'm good with
changes.
that
I don't
principle.
see any problem with that.
Yeah, I agree. And I suppose, I guess I would just ask if we're setting a percentage or some sort of metric for this one, if you could flag that in board briefs ahead of time as well, too.
Will do.
So if I can just have a motion that we're going to,
Was this the last?
for
For
it is. So I will entertain a motion in which to table this to the December 5th meeting.
So moved. I've taken such good notes of the changes we've made tonight.
No, I
so-
don't have.
Second.
Okay, so it has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Carson to table the discussion of operational expectations 4 with the amendments and changes, have that come back to the December 5th meeting with those changes and would be placed onto the consent agenda at that point in time. Any discussion? Director Stewart?
My concern is that I had one additional question as to the survey. And the survey issue is, do we have any kind of a breakdown as to the composition of those responding to it, as opposed to whether it's male, female, whether it's white, people of color, whatever? My concern is that we get, it's only a select group in the survey, and it's the same select group each year. We're not going to be telling ourselves anything different as to why we're not retaining our African American and Latino educators. See where I'm going?
So I can check to see if those are data that we've asked for in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? So with that, with all those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So this will come back for the December 5th with the revisions as discussed. You'll have a chance to review it in the packet. If for some reason it does not reflect what you were hoping, it can always get pulled from the consent agenda as well for further discussion.
Based on the discussion tonight, I am going to ask staff to start working on a number of these pieces, knowing that it's not final until the board approves it, but that there was good movement towards making some updates.
Great, thank you. So Appreciate that discussion. Our next item on the agenda is Operational Expectations 11, the instructional program. This is currently on our agenda to be monitored at our next meeting on December 5th. And so ideally, if these are acceptable changes, we can go forward. If not, again, they can't be tabled. We would just be postponing this to be monitored then on January. So, Dr. Holman.
And there's actually another change we will bring after monitoring that was pointed out a couple of weeks ago and forgot to get added into this. And it's looking at 11.8 and 11.10 because they really are similar to one another. And I believe our current language here around monitoring in 11.8 really is the same thing that 11.10 is stating. And so, again, trying to be clear around the board's values, but not just providing the same data set over and over in the same monitoring report because it's repetitive. And so I don't have it here tonight, and so I don't want to ask the board to take action on that, but that is something that we will do in the future as we continue to update these. And so the interest here was really to identify the board's value in the policy statement and to be clear around the interpretation and indicators as it relates to instructional programs. The board has a value around innovation. And what is innovation? Innovation is the action that is taken on any given thing to improve it, make it better, update it. Rarely are we just carte blanche doing something brand new. Most of the time, innovation really is about taking what is and improving upon it. There are times we bring in new programs and things like that, but even those typically are either a replacement of something we're currently doing or an enhancement of something we're doing. So the recommended policy statement is that to ensure that programs are responsive to emerging needs and monitored, adapted, and evaluated for effectiveness on a regular basis. And really that idea of adaptation really is that ongoing continuous cycle of improvement on the efforts of the district. Thinking about the interpretation, so you can see removed the extracurricular concept, and want to thank President Bleasner for pointing that out to me. When we think about our extracurriculars, well, there's a small set of them that are district directed. The majority of extracurriculars, when we're thinking about academic programs, are not under the direction of the school district's PTA. It's other types of activities. And so trying to be clear around what is the board really evaluating? And so we thought the greatest connection between the district and the district's authority was around curricular and co-curricular. And co-curricular would be something like, a band or orchestra class that is done, 0 period, and then that same group of students is then taking the course during the day. And so that's kind of a simplistic view of co-curricular. And so the interpretation says, I interpret programs to mean the curricular and co-curricular learning experiences of students. Furthermore, I interpret evaluating the effectiveness to mean a continuous improvement process. And what I don't know is that a term of art only to P12 systems? It's very part and parcel with how we think about the work of school improvement planning, evaluation of departments and programs. It's that continuous improvement where you're implementing, evaluating, modifying, and always kind of in that cycle. And so that's why I use that term. If that's not a term that is a typical term beyond K-12, then we can find a different different phrase. And so I'll finish this real quick. It says, I interpret evaluating the effectiveness to mean a continuous improvement process designed to review the quality of the implementation and outcomes to inform a judgment about whether changes are required. Finally, I interpret adapt to mean changes or modifications to a current program with the express intent of improving the outcomes and experiences for students. Director Stewart, you had a question about, I think, continuous improvement.
No, I had a question about when we go from extracurricular to co-curricular, and we're talking about the clubs, if you will, and the educational experience. Since we've chosen to have clubs for journalism and clubs for debate, as opposed to having actual classes that would actually benefit the student, how can we monitor how we're improving those students, how those programs are improving if we don't monitor an extracurricular? You see where I'm going? The idea that you're using that as a substitute for an actual class, when indeed there's no way of really judging if it's really worth the time and effort to even have the club. To be quite frank, in my opinion, we should have had classes, but that's another discussion for another day.
So clubs and activities are driven from student interest. And so there isn't if you will, a curriculum that's identified for those extracurricular, clubs, activities. And so I understand what you're saying. We don't have the, if you will, autonomy to then go direct the student club or activity and tell them, you can't focus on this, you need to focus on these areas, because it really is a student-driven, student-led activity.
So there's one more reason why we don't have a qualitative ability to improve the debate programs or the journalism programs, correct?
For right now this evening, if I may, we are focused specifically onto this policy and can remove to those at a different time. The instructional program will be monitored. It can be discussed at that point. Director Carlson?
Well, I appreciate the effort to disentangle two policies that are duplicative. But for me, the heart of 11.8 got lost in the mix. So we've wound up with two policies that are both about emerging needs monitored, adapted, and evaluated for effectiveness, or the other one is evaluate and modify for effectiveness. The most important part of 11.8 to me was the first 5 words: encourage new and innovative programs. This was about bringing new things in, as opposed to evaluating everything. How you evaluate new stuff, I don't care about. But the concept that 11.8 embodied for me was encouraging new and innovative programs, that we weren't always perfectly incremental, that it wasn't always about a top-down, that this was something where we could encourage the flourishing of innovation. And that I don't see at all in the redraft. I'm sorry. To me, that's the important piece of 11.8 that's truly independent of 11.10. 11.10, monitoring, adapting, effectiveness, I think is very good and important and would apply to new programs as well as existing programs. But if we don't have the encourage new and innovative programs here, we don't have it anywhere. And that concerns me.
Evan, sorry.
So this is right about in the overlap between your extracurriculars and your co-curriculars. And I just want to recognize that on the initial front. But speaking as a student, one of the most difficult parts of trying to start a new program that is led from a student perspective, because if we are looking at creating new programs that believe our new wording is responsive to emerging needs, we should be making sure that students are being able to effectively present their needs and have those needs be met through programs. Speaking as a student, the hardest part about that is getting staff and teacher buy-in and getting someone to take that first step towards allowing that program to start, because for the most part, I can do whatever I want outside of the school day as a student, but if I want to do something and have a program that meets a need that I see within my school during the school day or right after, I need a teacher or some sort of administrator to give me an okay on that. So I think somewhere in here, and maybe it's not 11.8, but if we are talking about encouraging and ensuring that programs are responsive to emerging needs, I would like to see some sort of language that involves incentivizing and encouraging teacher participation within programs.
Director Carlson.
So I just want to back up to the big picture. Does anybody else here find that responsive to emerging needs grasps the importance of innovation? Is that wording making anyone else happy? Because it does not make me happy.
I will just say I find innovative to be used for a lot of things, and therefore it doesn't mean a lot either. It's kind of like diversity if it's not defined.
Well-
So I think that's the whole pattern, is the matter of the definition. But what I'm hearing tonight, and just knowing where our agenda is at, is a lot more need for discussion potentially around 11.8 and 11.10. Director Liberty, were you going to say something else?
Yes, may I?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. I was wrestling with, I took two things from what Director Carlson said. One, concern that the board's value when we initially adopted, which I think was relatively recently, we adopted this new language, relatively new language for 11.8, was to capture the value of having a district that has constantly innovating programs. I don't have the same, yes.
And that doesn't mean that we have a continuous improvement plan. That's a very different concept than innovation.
Yes, and I agree with that. And I think that how this policy is now is that those two concepts are lumped together. And I agree with Director Carlson that something is lost when it's lumped together. So I actually think 11.10 captures, or is close-ish to capturing the need for monitoring and continuous improvement. And that would, in grafting this onto that and having a standalone policy about innovative programs, I think to me, that captures the value that I want in our policy. However, to me, the term responsive to emerging needs is synonymous with Okay, well, to me, it's more meaningful than innovative programs, which is a nice little buzzword, but to me, responsive emerging needs is more specific as to what we're trying to accomplish. So, okay, go ahead, Director Blazner.
Nope, go ahead.
I was going to echo what you said, which is I do think that we may want to have because I do think that this proposed change does reflect a substantive change to the policy, and I don't think we're all in alignment. I'd be not comfortable going forward.
So I'm hearing that's a potential motion that we table this to have a discussion, ideally put onto a study session is what my guess is, as opposed to a board meeting. Director Liberty, go ahead.
Well, here's my concern though, is that I would like to have this monitored sooner than later, and so I would be. I guess I would like. I don't know how to reconcile those two.
So potentially we would go ahead and monitor, but not monitor 11.8 until we have the opportunity in which to have that discussion, or continue monitoring as is and then make the changes after the fact. Correct?
So the cycle is that we monitor what's agreed to. And if there's not agreement to a change, then we will monitor what is. Even if 11.8 isn't as robust as the desire is. I think on all of our, on everybody's end. So we will just move forward with, assuming the board tables this and moves it forward, that we'll have a discussion about it and update the language for monitoring a year from now.
Potentially a little sooner than a year from now.
So if we agree to new policy language for the
Yes.
next cycle, it is a year from now that it'll be monitored. We'll monitor OE 11 at the next meeting.
Right, okay.
I moved to table the updates to the policy to OE 11.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Liberty and seconded by Director Choi to table the changes to policy OE 11. All those, any discussion?
No, I already said I already said everything.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, with that, we will then table that, plan to have that on, and probably, I know we're 2 for 2 tonight on that. It's okay. There's a lot of interest in making those right. That's not a bad thing. And so we will figure out onto the annual work plan where to build that into the study session with enough adequate time for discussion, as well as to get it prepared for the next time it gets monitored. So when you do see 11 at the next meeting, assume that you will see it currently how it is written. Okay. So would you like to start with 7? It's the one I see up there. Okay, so tonight, we're going to actually be monitoring 3 of our 4 operational expectation policies. These are all around the financial component, financial planning, financial administration, and asset protection. As you are all aware, this is how we establish our values about how the school district is expected to operate. The monitoring reports contain our superintendent's interpretation, as we've been discussing, and reviews our current conditions, and makes up the actions of the board's oversight of the organization. So first tonight on the agenda is operational expectation 5 for financial planning. So with
Great.
that, Dr. Holman.
Thank you. And so, again, tonight I'll go through the policy with some brief summary and findings around each policy area. I will pause, allow President Bleasner to see if there's any comments or questions, and then move through the monitoring that way. Each of you received monitoring reports for OE 5, 6, and 7 about 10 days ago, and so you've had those. They're also in your packet, available for you to review. The policy statement around OE 5 says that the superintendent shall develop and present to the board a multi-year financial plan that is related directly to the board's results, priorities, and operational expectations goals, and that avoids long-term fiscal jeopardy to the district. There's 11 policy components, some that the superintendent will and some that the superintendent may not, and we'll go through each of those tonight. This report is presented to you as compliant. 5.1 states that the superintendent will develop a budget that is in a summary format, understandable to the board and community, presented in a manner that allows the board to understand the relationship between the budget and the results, priorities, and any operational expectations, goals for the year. So just a few pieces around this. The board does receive the budget information through written, verbal, and visual presentations. And so those are constituted through written board updates, study sessions, presentations at board meetings, conversations. That's the verbal piece, or at our study sessions. The budget is prepared using required state formats and also formats that are more readable. And so, as you know, we've been recognized for the how we put our budget together, and that really is based on outside expertise, providing a format that has been demonstrated to be more accessible, knowing that the amount of information within our budget is a tremendous amount of information, but really tying, that format does truly require us to tie our strategic direction and priorities to our budget resource allocations. The budget is explicitly connected to the strategic direction of the district, which does support the board's results policies.
Any questions or clarifications? All right, back to you.
5.2 states that the superintendent will develop a budget that clearly describes revenues and expenditures with adequate supporting detail. And so both external and internal controls are in place and validated through auditing procedures, which concurs with the district's reporting of our revenues and our expenditures. And so we go through processes to make sure that external entities agree with us, but also we have internal controls to make sure that there's checks and balances as we're reporting that to the board. Another check and balance around that is OSPI is required to approve and adopt the district's budget, and that was done within the appropriate time frame for the 22-23 budget.
Questions? All right.
5.3 states that the superintendent will develop a budget that shows the amount spent in each budget category for the most recently completed fiscal year, the amount budgeted for the current fiscal year, and the amount budgeted for the next fiscal year. And just that the board receives budget information that demonstrates historical and projected revenues and expenditures.
Director Carlson?
I just want to say that the lack of commentary here speaks volumes positively to
Yes.
Barbara's team developing an incredibly transparent budget. So, no questions.
Thank you. Dr. Holman?
5.4 states that the superintendent will develop a budget that discloses budget planning assumptions. And while this is a very short policy statement in value, what an incredibly important part of the process so that the board can understand what are all the underlying data that's being used to project the current budget we're preparing, but also into the year. And so part of that is that the board receives enrollment updates throughout the year because, as you know, the majority of our revenues are based on our student enrollment. That helps us project our budgets moving into the future. The board receives preliminary enrollment projections early in the calendar year based on outside expert demographer input and validation, and budget presentations include detailed budget assumption information that influence the overall budget picture.
No questions.
Superintendent will assure financial soundness in future years that includes provisions for reasonable contingencies. So our 4-year outlook demonstrates contingencies and planning based on assumptions and known changes such as enrollment projections, changes in compensation requirements, new overhead costs due to constructing of new schools, and other impactful and known conditions. And so just trying to take in those big items that we know are going to affect the budget in the long term.
On this one, I just want to say thank you for the plans to reduce our carryover, a very thoughtful way to bring us in for a soft landing on that, so thank you.
5.6 provides necessary information to the board on matters with significant budgetary impact, allowing the board adequate time to consider the information presented. So as a board, you receive monthly financial reports that provides an ongoing kind of a rolling view of our financial status. And the board was notified of the general fund budget extension in writing prior to the board meeting where you received a presentation and approved a budget extension. And in the report, it states when that was. I believe that was June of 22. 5.7 reflects anticipated changes in employee compensation, including inflationary adjustments, step increases, performance increases, and benefits. So the budget includes known changes to employee compensation. I say known because as we update contracts and things like that, if they're adopted after the budget is adopted, then we have to go back and that will change the overall budget picture. But so it's known employee compensation, and the budget information presented to the board consistently provided as we went through the winter and spring last year, an assumption of IPD increasing beyond previously reported limits.
No question.
And 5.8 includes such amounts as the board determines to be necessary for its own governing function. And so as you can see in the report, there's a grid that kind of outlines the various areas that dollars are set aside for the operations of the governance procedures, things such as, audits, election expenses, professional learning of the board. Those kinds of things are set aside in the budget annually.
Sorry.
Director La Liberty?
I've wondered this, I've been meaning to ask it. The election expenses that show up in the board's budget, are those the elections for board members? Could you explain what that is?
I'll make a statement, and then I'm going to look to my right
Yep.
to confirm.
Good idea.
That is when we run funding measures, levies or bonds, those election expenses. And Associate Superintendent Barbara Posthumus will provide you with a more thorough response.
So it includes in the years that we have board elections, those costs are included, and in the years that we have levy elections, those costs are included. So the 21, 22 year, both are in there. Some years it's only a levy cost, some years it's a board cost, and some years it's both. So the 21, 22 number is typically the highest you'll see.
Okay, so my understanding is the district pays some portion of the election expenses that the county incurs for levies, bonds, et cetera.
Yes, we pay a portion of the voters pamphlet costs and then a portion of, the election costs. If we are in February when multiple districts are running, that cost is proportional. So it depends on how many people are on the ballot, and then those costs are divided.
Thank you, everyone.
And actually, just to be absolutely clear for the audience, election costs, none of this is campaign costs.
You took the words out of my mouth. Okay, great question.
No other questions.
Okay, 5.9, a budget that is based on reasonable consultation with appropriate constituent groups. So here, the district has internal processes and procedures to seek feedback and input on the budget. Part of that is the program survey we talked about in OE4 and other things. External feedback and input includes information from the Student and Family Panorama Survey, feedback through levy informational sessions, and the required public hearing, which is made available to all community members. I think this is an area, we've talked about this in other monitoring areas, but this is an area where we can improve and receive more substantive feedback from our community around our budget processes.
Oops, how about Evan, how about Shivani, then Evan?
Okay, so in this, in 5.9, you talk about how you're going to budget to address the comprehensive needs of the entire district. And I was just wondering if this would also include co-curricular activities like you talked about before, and the specifics of this budget, because I feel like that might be beneficial to address what exactly this budget would be taking care of in the district.
So I'll answer your question. If I don't fully answer it, then let me know. So co-curricular, because they are district activities, they are part of the overall budget. Now, part of the budget is district, part of the budget is school. And so as we look towards where our different revenue streams for different things, those will vary, but as we think about the overall budget, building budgets are included in our overall general fund budget.
Okay, thank you.
And then I personally agree with the idea that we have the opportunity to, I believe what it says is improve student, family, and community feedback into the budget process. I totally get that there's a lot of barriers to overcome when it comes to getting student input. I was wondering, within the evidence of compliance we have right now, because I don't know all of these different leadership teams and groups, what aspects of this do you feel are kind of working towards that, maybe are representative of our student interests, even though they're not directly the students?
Yeah, so I would say that so our strategic advisory leadership group is comprised of leaders from across the district. And so the voice of our schools is squarely part of that conversation. That's a few steps removed from an actual student providing actual feedback to us around the budget. I think that's where we want to get to. In OE14, there's a policy component around budget processes that we're in the development process around. Part of that is student and family engagement. Part of that is also reaching out to potentially parents and students that may not have ever wanted to or participated previously in these types of processes. And so it's being more thoughtful about kind of the overall input.
So to just build on Evan's statement, is potentially consider an indicator that is specific to actively seeking community impact on the budget priorities, being students as well as our families and parents. So just to consider that as we go forward, because we state that it's stated in the interpretation must allow for feedback and input from groups that are affected by the projected expenditures of an improved budget. However, there is no indicator that really does that component. We have a public hearing. And so ideally saying if we can set something, perhaps then we won't lose it. Yes, Director Carlson.
And I'm not sure, have you two seen the F-195 phone book? You don't even have a clue what I'm talking about. Okay, so the budget processes occur at macro scales and micro scales. I think that when it comes to something like student clubs and stuff, the minimum resolution we have is an ASB line that isn't even building specific. It's for the whole district, right? And we don't have building specific budgets in the F-195, do we? No. Yeah, so at the student level, I think the budgets you might have greater interest in having impact might be on building school budgets, which do derive from this. But it's at the micro scale where you're talking about specific items, that would definitely fall under school. But there's definitely room to try and build that into the system as an improvement. I'm not sure that students will find the F-195 all that satisfying.
I'm not sure it's only looking at the F-195. Part of just being part of the, what are the issues, what are the priorities, what are the things you'd like to see done? That's the idea around the same similar concept of what we use, but it's also putting it out to our parents and staff and students. Right now, we're pretty clear with our staff and schools. I think sometimes we don't get out to the community. I know in the past we've done surveys and done some different things, but I appreciate your bringing that forward as something to do. I'd just like to sort of codify it within the policy through an indicator. Evan.
I apologize if this is kind of laboring the point, but I wanted to give a perspective of why I think it is important that we are making sure we talk to students, not only because I think obviously we can always say that there are student perspectives that are being lost. We're never going to find all of them, but like I can say as ASB president, I have to read out all of the purchases that are made within my school on a weekly basis. And we have a treasurer who has to sign all of those. So as much as it is really great that we have kind of more district and administrative level people that are going through and discussing during this budget process, and I don't want to speak on behalf of those people, I will say I would be interested to see if there is anyone on the district level that has the same level of in-depth school-to-school knowledge of what the expenditures and where we are falling short is compared to those students that are on ASB who are having to approve all of those purchases on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, thank you. I think as we talk about involvement of different stakeholders, I'm just trying to, as I think about, like, how do you get good input on a $500 million budget? I mean, truly, as we are thinking about if student behavioral health, really addressing that and making changes to those programs and services, and that's a very specific topic that how beneficial if we went and sat down with students to say, what are you thinking about? What do you need? As we're thinking about partnering with community agencies and contracting, that would then help inform us around kind of efforts that are very strategic, but that have budget implications. And so that to me is kind of at a broader level. You're talking at a very micro level, and that's why I'm not handing the microphone off to Barbara, because she'd argue with you about who knows what. So that's, as I think about it, it's being very kind of strategic and tactical about, here's the, a direction we're going. Let's go get some really good feedback around this before we then go make a budget decision. That's true of adding. That could also be true of, we need to reduce the budget. We need some feedback and input around these things as we're making some of those decisions as well. So great points.
Any further discussion on 5.9? Okay, going on.
Thank you. So we're in the section of the superintendent may not develop a budget that plans for expenditure in any fiscal year of more funds than are conservatively projected to be available during that year. In the budget information the board receives, the district's budget includes the use of revenue and fund balance explicitly.
Any questions? I have a quick request, though. Could you just add the actual numbers or a link where it could be found?
To the budget. Is that,
Within the evidence on here.
yes.
Thanks.
Okay, 511, may not develop a budget that provides for an anticipated year-end fund balance of less than 5% of the projected revenue. The budget assures a 5% fund balance for the current and projected budgets.
Any questions? I just have one other request. The actual percentage we currently have would be beneficial.
Okay, a couple policy considerations. Oh,
Sorry, Shafani, didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
No worries. Actually, I was wondering about 5.9. You talked about how you wanted to get feedback on the budget and then, be able to implement that. I was wondering, in the past, have you ever taken feedback into consideration, when making the budget? For example, I know for student concerns, there's sustainability, clean energy, and mental health resources. Have those ever been taken into consideration in the past years, or is it still something that you're working on?
I would say in a very systemic way, meaning it's been done, more than small conversations. I would say we haven't done a great job of really making sure that, if we want, voice from, all of our high schools around that, being strategic about getting to each of our high schools so it isn't just, one or two high schools or one small group at a high school. So that's part of the plan to do it better.
Okay, this is kind of specific, but I was wondering, do you currently have any plans to do that, implement student voice into that? Or?
Yeah, so kind of back to what I said about OE14. So part of OE14 is a very specific process for budget. Along with, we know our current projections around our budget are that we need to make some reductions. So there's kind of two things that are playing out right now. One, we have a policy requirement to develop a process. And so, as early as this year, we're going to be moving forward with that. So we'll bring information to the board in January around, at a minimum, part of that process for input and feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to your policy considerations.
Okay, so just a couple considerations. 5.2, want to review in 5.2, review policy and indicators to ensure that they actually align. And so I'll bring a recommendation forward to the board. You're probably wondering specifically, what are you talking about? It's the, yes. So it references the audit in 5.2, and that really isn't a great indicator for evaluating revenue and expenditures. And so we want to make sure that there's alignment there. And also in 5.3, it really is language that's probably from 4, 5, maybe 6 years ago. So right now we have a requirement for a 4-year outlook for a budget. We've done that for years. That isn't new for us. There was many districts when that became law that was a brand new practice. They were doing a single year outlook on their budget. And so I just want to update the policy to align with the law. And so that means policy, interpretation, and indicators. And that's my,
Director LaLiberty.
I have an additional policy consideration.
Okay.
The overall policy, I guess we'll call it the prefatory language of it, the superintendent shall develop and present to the board a multi-year financial plan that is directly related to the board's results, priorities, and operational expectation goals. And it got dark in here. Every time, when we do receive a budget, I appreciate that it's always tied to our priorities and our goals, and those are clearly aligned when it's presented. And so the district is in compliance with that. The issue I have with the policy is that in the 5.1, 5.2, et cetera, that is not part of it. And so that is in the introductory language to the policy. It's then not captured in any of the subpoints. And so we're not really, there's no indicator. We're not monitoring that. There's no, in my view, there's no clear language that captures that. So just a consideration is to pull that out into I hate adding additional policy language, but pulling that out into another sub-policy where there is a sub-policy that the budget shall, I don't know, that does captures that first sentence that I read aloud, that it is directly related to the board's priorities and goals. So an idea for future amendments.
would an alternative be to update the indicators and interpretation around 5.1 to include that?
Well, I thought about that, but maybe.
And I commented a couple meetings ago,
Yeah.
I would prefer to add policy language that's clear and specific as opposed to trying to piecemeal things together. And so,
Yeah, and whereas right now 5.1 captures it captures a few different ideas. And honestly, because of that, I missed that component of it. I thought it was not even captured in it. So I guess an additional policy consideration is to consider splitting 5.1 into two sub-policies, one being that it's in a format understandable to the board and the community, period. And then another that it's presented in a manner that allows the board to understand the relationship between the budget and the priorities. So I do think those are two different concepts. I'm not sure I agree with this idea yet, but it's something I want us to think about a little bit more. It could be a good idea.
We can capture it,
Yeah.
that explore the possibility of how to better incorporate the introductory language into a policy below.
I move that we allow Director LaLiberty to debate the topic.
I just wanted to add, if we could relook at the indicators for 5.9 to include something about the community.
When you say relook at the indicators for 5.9 specifically, you had just asked that we relook at the indicators for 5.9. I'm just trying to confirm, what are we looking at?
Yes, to add a component about reaching out to students or parents in the community
Okay, thank you.
for the budget development process in particular.
Any other questions? All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to approve OE5 as presented.
So
As in
moved.
compliance. So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director LaLiberty to approve Operational Expectation 5 as presented. Any further discussion?
Just once again, thank you. This is an incredibly important piece of operating the district that our district historically has done an extraordinarily good job on. When we're audited, we come out with clean audits, and frankly, I believe that, darn it, I'm just blanking. It's deputy superintendent. Anyway, Barbara, it's been killing me. I don't want to call you, but that she teaches other districts about how to do this stuff and do it well. So this continues to be a very conveniently quiet portion of our OE monitoring, which is highly commendable.
Thank you. Director Liberty, did you have a?
Yeah, I seconded the motion, so I view the policies and compliance in particular. I just want to, so for 5.9, it's tricky. So because it's a large budget, it's a very complex budget, having community input on the budget itself is always, I mean, we've had I think two people comment on the budget ever since I've been on the board in the last 7 years. And that is, okay, so that's either evidence of we're doing a great job and everyone is comfortable with what we're doing, or it's evidence that we could do better at engaging. I don't know which one it is. But I actually don't, my interest is less with focusing engagement on the community on the nuts and bolts of the budget and more on priorities and values and those components. And I think that's more useful to the district. And so I guess let's see how I phrase this. It's important to engage with the community on the nuts and bolts of the budget itself, and we're required to do that by law. But I am actually comfortable with the level of engagement that we have currently on the budget itself. The engagement, I think we all agree we can do more on what feeds into that budget and more on the values component.
So I would agree with you in regards, it's sort of a concept, budgeting by priorities is a practice out there that is utilized in many places. And so you sort of set the priorities and then you work the budget around it. Same concept of what we do, but it's allowing sort of the strategic approach that Dr. Holman was speaking about. I would agree with you that I encourage a much more strategic approach for that feedback as opposed to the overall entire budget in which to do so. Any other comments in regards to Operational Expectation 5? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We are now on to Operational Expectation 6, Financial Administration.
Okay, financial administration, policy statement. The superintendent shall not cause or allow any financial activity or condition that materially deviates from the budget adopted by the board, cause or allow any fiscal condition that is inconsistent with achieving the board's results, priorities, or meeting any operational expectations, goals, or places the financial health of the district in jeopardy. Again, we have 13 policy components in this area. It is presented to the board as incompliant. 6.1 states that the superintendent will assure that payroll and legitimate debts of the district are promptly paid when due. The district consistently has met its payroll and accounts payable obligations in the 21-22 school year.
No questions, thank you.
6.2, assure that all purchases are made considering comparative prices of items of similar quality, considering a balance between cost and long-term quality, and using competitive procurement procedures required by law. And you have additional evidence in your report, but the district consistently follows procurement procedures as confirmed by our audit results.
No questions.
6.3, coordinate and cooperate with the financial auditor for an annual audit of all district funds and accounts. And so I can concur that we continue to cooperate and coordinate with our auditor. We actually, at the last audit meeting, the exit audit with the auditors, they actually complimented staff around their level of cooperation and coordination such that they feel very positive about their experience here in Lake Washington, because I believe the audit process takes about 6 months for them to complete. And so the district does comply with our required auditing process. We did receive one audit finding for the documentation, not the expenditure, but the documentation of what's called federal time and effort. And we were notified of that, and we had maintained or achieved compliance by the end of the audit process. And so we were able to rectify that, but that was a finding that was in our audit report.
No questions.
6.4, make all reasonable efforts to collect any funds due the district from any source. And so we do consistently work to collect our debts. Our audit findings indicate no material losses, and you can see our write-offs are a very, very small percent of our district's general fund budget.
No question.
6.5, keep complete and accurate financial records by funds and accounts in accordance with GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles, and we do maintain those records in accordance with GAAP, as confirmed by our audit.
No questions.
6.6, publish a financial condition statement annually, and that is updated on our website annually to provide financial reports to the public.
No questions, thank you.
6.7, ensure that all required reports are accurate and filed in a timely manner. Our audit provided an unmodified opinion that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material aspects. That's auditor language, and so that's how they say you have done it correctly and well. On one audit finding was regarding documentation, but did not affect the financial standing of the district.
No questions.
6.8, the superintendent may not, without board approval, expend more funds that have been received in the fiscal year unless revenues are made available through other legal means, including the use of fund balance, the authorized transfer of funds from reserve funds, or from tax anticipation notes. So funds expended were in alignment with the budget, which included the use of fund balance. The board did approve a budget extension in June of '22.
No questions.
6.9, the superintendent may not, without board approval, indebt the organizations, and there was no new debt issued during the 21-22 school year.
No questions.
6.10, may not, without board approval, expend monies from the reserve funds, and there were no expenditures from the required 5% fund balance during the last budget year.
No questions.
6.11 may not permanently transfer money from one fund to another. Any transfers of funds were part of the approved budget by the board, and nothing was transferred outside of that.
No questions.
And 6.12 may not receive, process, or disperse funds under controls that are insufficient under generally accepted accounting procedures. And the district used appropriate accounting procedures as confirmed through our audit process.
No questions.
And the superintendent may not, without board approval, invest funds in investments that are not secured or that are not authorized by law. There's actually state law for how this is supposed to work, and all investments are in accordance with that law.
I still see no questions.
And so one policy consideration that we want to bring forward in 6, 3, 5, 7, and 12, the indicators all relate to the audit. And so we're just thinking about potentially, is there a way to consolidate those indicators in one area? Again, so that the board isn't just receiving repetitive evidence, but as it's called out repetitively in the indicators, it calls for repetitive evidence.
Any further questions for Dr. Holman? With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve OE6 as presented as in compliance.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director Liberty to approve OE6. Any further discussion? Director Liberty?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to be the board member who participated in the audit process this year. And I want to, I can vouch for Dr. Holman that what he said about the exit interview is accurate. The state was very complimentary of the way that staff handled the audit. And I can also say being interviewed by a state auditor as a board member, it feels a little uncomfortable proposition, but it's nice to go into that feeling very comfortable of being informed about the financial health of the district. So I appreciate the process and I appreciate the work of staff.
Any other discussion or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the motion as presented, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you for a job well done. Appreciate all the work in this area. All right, so now we will move on to operational expectations 7, asset protection.
Okay, the policy statement for OE7 states the superintendent will assure that all district assets are adequately protected, properly maintained, appropriately used, and not placed at undue risk. So there's 8 component areas that we'll review this evening. This report is presented to you as incompliant. 7.1 states that the superintendent will maintain property and casualty insurance coverage on district real and personal property with real property limits equal to 100% of replacement value. And you have additional evidence in your report, but the district maintains appropriate insurance as required by the board.
No questions.
7.2 states that the superintendent will maintain errors and omissions, employment and comprehensive general liability insurance coverage, protecting board members, staff, and the district itself in an amount that is reasonable for school districts of comparable size and character. The district does maintain liability insurance for staff, the board, and the district. The district runs a self-insured workers' compensation program, which has been in place for many years. The district also conducted an evaluation of our liability insurance, as many of the districts of comparable size actually had a different liability insurance program. We did make a shift in that, and so as part of next year's monitoring, you'll see a different set of evidence around that.
No questions.
7.3, the superintendent will adequately protect the district against theft or misappropriation of funds by any personnel who have access to material amounts of district or school funds. In here, the district complies with state laws to ensure the superintendent and the controller are both bonded. Those are legal requirements. And additional coverage for all staff is maintained through the Washington State Risk Management Pool.
No questions.
The superintendent will protect actual property, information, files, records, and fixed assets from loss or significant damage. There's actually quite a bit of evidence in your report. Simply put, the district maintains processes and procedures to maintain controls of information and records. The district responds to incidents of potential loss to ensure human error leading to loss is minimized. Because we know the amount of data and information that is processed, if we see a potential for leading to loss, then we remedy that. We put systems in place. If there's an error, we look at that and we make sure that if it was a system issue, that we address the system.
Director Choi?
In the evidence of compliance, sorry, frog in my throat. In the evidence of compliance, there's a reference to, in 2021, 97.1% of fixed assets were located. And I was wondering if you could provide some reference for that number. Like, is that consistently where we come in around 97%? Like, is that good? Is it bad? Is it trending up? Is it trending down? Just
So I asked some questions about that number as well, so thank you for asking. We consistently are identifying about 97 to 98% of our fixed assets. Beyond that, some of those then are found or identified as, damaged, broken, things like that. And then there are some that are lost or stolen, things like that, that are write-offs.
And do we see a consistent number with, because it mentions that the districts and the buildings trade off each year? So do we see that number, is there a trend with kind of when the best district performs the, what's the term? The inventory analysis versus when the buildings perform the inventory analysis?
So part of the district process when they're there is essentially to confirm and use that information that the schools have, and they are very, very close, maybe not exact, but very close in the percentage of assets they're identifying.
No other questions?
Great. So 7.5 states that the superintendent will properly preserve and dispose of all records related to affairs or business of the district, and the district appropriately maintain records with no reports of record loss or noncompliance.
No questions?
Okay, 7.6, the superintendent may not, without the board's approval, permit equipment to be subject to improper use or insufficient maintenance, and the district used and maintained equipment in alignment with expectations.
No questions?
Great. 7.7, again, without board approval, unreasonably expose the district, the board, or staff to legal liability. And you have evidence in your packet, but in summary, the district takes steps in all areas of liability to reduce exposure.
And Shivani?
Okay, so I actually don't really have a question about this, in general. I just have a question about the evidence of compliance. Like, under this section, you have a table of training schedules by job function. I was wondering if this was finalized or it could be edited in any way, because I know from a student perspective, at least, I feel like staff, at least in school, should be given some sort of mental health awareness training so they're able to recognize signs in students. So I was just wondering, would this be able to be edited, or is this the final version?
So why don't I follow up with you on where that lands? We're required by law to maintain what's called a suicide prevention plan. I believe as part of that plan, there's required training around exactly what you just identified. And so let me check in on that. I'm trying to think if that would, so as we think about protecting ourselves from exposure to liability, what that's looking at is, are we going to be financially accountable for not doing something? And so, but I can check with the team around, does that plan actually require that type of training? And then I'll ask a question of, should that be listed here in this? Because I could see it being a potential requirement here. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
No other questions?
Okay. 7.8, without board approval, take any action that damages the district's public image or credibility. Simply, the superintendent has not received formal or informal feedback from the board that a specific action had the potential to damage the district's public image or credibility.
No questions?
Okay, a couple of policy considerations. 7.1 policy update. Move the word casualty to 7.2 as it's an issue of liability, not property. And so it's probably been in there forever, and it's just it's actually a misstatement. And then 7.3, modify indicators to reflect current required deductible. And if I had at the top of my head what that current required deductible is, I would share that with you, but my team has told me it's not currently reflective.
All right, any questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Move approval as presented, which is in compliance.
Second.
Been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Stewart to approve as presented as in compliance. Any further discussion? Director Choi.
So, and this might also not be the right place for this, so you can let me know. But is under 7.7, I'm curious, is there a schedule in which we may reevaluate limits of requirements for things such as insurance that individuals have to participate in school-related events, like taking students in your car for a field trip? And I'm asking that in relation to looking at it through an equity lens. Are we limiting the participation of families by potentially having too high of a requirement?
And I've reached out to get a response on that. I got an initial response. I didn't ask the right question, and so I'm getting, I followed up and I'll get some additional information
But
around
in terms
that.
of like a policy, like is there a timeline, or is there a method, or is there a process in which we evaluate those limits and those restrictions?
Let me ask that question, and and I'll bring that back, and if we want to make a policy consideration, we can. Yeah.
Any other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So thank you. That was through those three monitoring parts of OE5, OE6, OE7. I'd like to just highlight what Director Carlson did say, that the lack of commentary or questions is often due to the excellent work that is done by our staff in being able to manage all the finance of the organization. So thank you for all the work in doing so and keeping that all very well applied. So our next item on the agenda this evening is we do have two board summaries from two of our monitoring reports. Our first one is Operational Expectation 9, which was communication and engagement with the community. It was reviewed, monitoring 2 weeks ago at our last board meeting. And so for summary, I'd just like to give it, hopefully you've all had the chance to read it, but the commendations around it, just to highlight, was excellent work to implement multiple modalities of communication: email, Parent Square, Facebook, website, local schools, equity and family engagement team. This all enhances the likelihood of families and communities being aware of communications and engaged with public education. Also, giving a kudos for the implementation of Parent Square appears to have streamlined communication efforts and opened up opportunity to send, receive in languages other than English. And the board appreciates the continuing efforts to strengthen community partnership and to enhance involvement in student supports to best address needs. Collaboration with our community partners strengthens our public schools. Those are sort of the highlights that came through from the policy review. The directions provided were: consider the addition of an indicator of compliance on family perception for communication effectiveness, specifically if the translation tool component. Consider the addition of an indicator of compliance for providing relevant communication in multiple modalities. Explore the publication of the district's strategic partnerships internally and public-facing. And for policy, consider the addition of a sub-policy to provide community access to district and school-level data through a public-facing dashboard. So with that is currently there. Any discussion? If not, I will move to...
Move approval of the board summary for the results for OE9.
Second.
Mm-hmm.
Any discussion?
The only discussion is, having reviewed this, it accurately captures, and adequately, the board's conversation and direction at our, when we monitored OE9.
Okay, hearing no other discussion. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda, and our last one for monitoring reports this evening, so thank you for sticking through that. It has been very informative, the discussion, is Operational Expectation 14, Anti-Racism, Anti-Discrimination, Equity, and Inclusion in Education. With that, it did take a while to put that together. So this is rather long, so I'm actually not going to read, and now I just got kicked out. Thank you. So first I would ask, just even before can I scroll? It's been a long night. So the thing I want to highlight on this one, if you've had the chance to review it, you might have noticed one change that was within it. As we went through this, two of the 11 sub-policies were written as in compliance, and several of them was written as not in compliance or in the need for additional data. So based on that, I took the liberty to add a subsection, a sub-step in this process, and actually request for an update on the data collection and what the process would be to be provided by the end of March of 2023. Not that it would be remonitored anyways, but just to know what were the plans for the sense of the focus group data in regards to the variety of different data components that were laid out. So that's sort of a new addition that was put into the monitoring report. The actual monitoring of the entire report would not occur until the September of the following year, of 2023. So that's sort of the big change between this. So, and, sort of in summary, what I would say is the big piece of this is we appreciated all the efforts to complete the report, recognizing that this is the first time for this policy to be monitored, that trending data is not available, and that the report requires significant data collection and analysis that is in development. The overall monitoring report provides additional insight into compliance as well as areas for opportunity and growth. With currently there are 2 of 11 sub-policies reported as incompliant, indicating that there is significant work to be done to ensure operations are aligned with these stated values. That's right. Then it goes into a little more specifics that you can look at. As you reviewed that, is there any concerns or questions of things that were there or that might be missing?
So not concerns with either of those, but just making sure that March 2023 doesn't cause huge consternation. Is that a deadline you feel is reasonable?
In talking with President Bleasner and reading this here, I think it's more of an update around
Right.
process, not an update around
Data.
collected data.
Okay.
And so I think that's a good timeline.
Okay.
Since, March, we're starting to get towards the end of the year, and it'll be monitored really,
That's fair.
3 months, school months later.
Yes.
So yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we were setting a deadline that our superintendent felt was feasible. So, good.
All right, hearing no questions, I will entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Been moved by Director Carlson, seconded by Director Liberty to approve the summary of OE 14 as presented, that includes an update of the process for data collection by March of 2023. Any further comments or discussion? Director La Liberty.
I want to thank Director Bleasner for taking on this report. It was a lengthy and wide-ranging conversation, and I really, really appreciate this, because this is important to provide clear feedback to staff on what we like to see. So I do really appreciate the time that you put into this. I know it took a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, then I will vote. All those who are in favor of approving OE 14 summary as presented, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you for all. Director La Liberty.
I realized I had another idea. We don't typically post, these board summaries are typically available on board docs, and that's about it, or in the meetings tab. I do wonder, if there may be some interest in, given the ongoing work of the board and the relative infancy of this policy, of posting this separately on the, somewhere on the district's website and the board tab, it could be a good idea. I think we do want, I still want community feedback. I always want community feedback, but particularly right now on this policy. And so I think having it just a little easier to find might be a good idea.
No, that makes sense.
I think, yeah.
There's a few clicks required to go through board docs to get to it. So we can look at the possibility of how to make that easier. Any other comments? If not, I'm going to say thank you for all the monitoring work. We are not quite yet done. There are a few more items still on the agenda. Our next item on the agenda is the superintendent report. Dr. Holman.
So last week was recognized as American Education Week, and we were fortunate enough to be able to invite community leaders from across our community in for what has historically been known as the Superintendent's Community Leaders Breakfast. And a number of you were able to participate, including Evan, who was able to skip out of class that day. So I don't know how you pulled that off, but it was exciting to have you there. So American Education Week, it serves two purposes. One is to celebrate the successes, but also to recognize the value of public education. And coming out of COVID, I don't think there's ever been a better time to recognize the value of public education and what it truly means for a community. And so the event was scheduled for maybe an hour and a half. We went a little long because we recognized the number of our community partners. Our Eastside Native American Education Program, ENAP, Mary Wilbur, and a number of her students and leaders were there to open the ceremony with a song. One of our ENAP students, I believe from Lake Washington High School, opened with a land acknowledgement that was heartfelt, and I noticed something different than I'd ever heard before from our students, advocacy. She made the comment of read about your local tribes, go visit a local tribal center, or donate to a local tribe. And it was it was really exciting to hear her voice and advocacy, and that really is what ENAP is about. It's about lifting our Native students up, giving them a place where they're discovering their culture, their heritage, their language, as it translates into to them as people. And so it was so exciting to have them there, recognize Mary Wilbur for her work and hear her speak on behalf of the program. We also recognize Sodexo as a partner. They've been a partner for many years, yet during the pandemic, they, yes, pivoted and shifted and did things that they had never done before as they partnered with our transportation and our bus drivers that didn't have routes to drive, just making sure that kids that needed food resources received those resources. We also recognized WANIC, our skills center that's located here in the district, knowing that they are providing opportunities and experiences. And to quote Carrie Hsu, our director at WANIC, they don't want to be the best kept secret any longer. They want to be the most known entity for all of our students. And finally, we recognize the Lake Washington Schools Foundation and their partnership in a number of areas. And Executive Director Katie Phillips brought with her a student from Kamaikan Middle School who talked about the Inclusive Libraries Project. And it gave everyone in the room chills to hear her articulate the purpose of this program and initiative, and to hear her talk about reading a book for the first time where the main characters in the book, she saw herself in them. She saw characters that looked like her, that had background experiences like her, and how that she was excited about it. It made her feel like she was valued. It was everything we want our Inclusive Libraries Project to be. and to hear students put voice to it was very exciting. We messaged our community on Friday with just a note about this, with an associated video to really celebrate our community and just to recognize all of the great things that are occurring and have occurred in the past years, even in some of the most difficult times. And so wanted to recognize those partners again, recognize that a number of you were present at that day, and want to thank Dr. Ross for putting in a lot of time and energy to make that a tremendous event that really did celebrate our community, our partnerships, but more importantly, our students. The theme of American Education Week was students today, leaders tomorrow. And I think each of our partnerships highlighted how we're trying to support that effort.
Thank you. So our next item on the agenda is Public and Community Affairs. Director Stewart, anything to report?
This last weekend, we were with the Washington State School Directors Association, and we talked extensively about priorities and our legislative meetings that are coming up in January. In particular, we'll be focusing on special education, just as our own personal district focus is. Also, we'll be looking at dates in the near future for Senator Wellman to tour, visit, however you want to put it, the Inclusion Project. She is very enthusiastic about learning more about it. She has it heads the Education Committee, if you will, for lack of a better term, and she's really wants to see how it's going, what it's going, the improvement it'll make in those kids' lives. Anyway, and we will be meeting with our local legislators now that the dust has settled from the elections. We will be meeting with those folks in this coming weeks.
Thank you. Director Carlson.
Yes, I know. I came out of my cave while you guys were off having fun at WASDA and attended the Lake Washington Learning Community Boundary Input Session, which I commend. The preparation for it was actually it was well put together, and it was, I don't know what to call it, it was attended. There were more attendees from the community than there were presenters, but of the 7,000 families who are potentially affected by this, it was a small slice of that. Fortunately, very clearly, there were gaggles of PTA members from each of the affected elementary schools that rotated through the room. And so that's the node through which information will be transmitted out in the communities. That's great. The three options, I do take a close look at them. There is a very small sliver down at the border between Audubon and Rush that is a very big number of kids affected. That's a very subtle thing that's very important for us to rebalance in this section of the district. So overall, again, this is you don't reboundary if you don't have to. So doing nothing is not an option. And fortunately, all but one of the parents who I spoke to actually came away nodding and agreeing with me that doing nothing is not an option. But there will be parents who are affected, and so this is something I think at this stage it's not normal for us to broadcast that, okay, we're going to put in place boundaries for the long term, but that there is the playing through of, if we do it right, we'll wind up with a school that actually has room for variances to bring the kids who are affected to finish out. Even if we don't have a bus for them, they can continue in the building. That's going to be critical because probably the best option that I saw as far as the long-term solutions is probably the one that affects the most kids in the short term. And therefore, we're going to need a lot of that pressure release valve. And getting that information out in the community is something that we usually do if we can. And that model did seem to have it would fit, is going to be very important. Because once people understand that there's a difference between today's problem and the long-term problem, then they can start seeing that there are two different things to solve right now. But, darn it, my cul-de-sac across from the street, you're telling me that I can't go to that school? Taking that emotion out of it really does help. So the good news is that it was well attended, and it will get out in the community. The bad news is that the public comment period is still, was through Wednesday of this week. Or I would argue that through Sunday night, there will be nothing done with that data. So at the very least, we could extend it through midnight on Sunday for public input on these proposals. But also with a clear nod to the fact that this is the first round. Public input will be taken and revised into things that are closer to what we're actually going to implement. Simply because among the three, there were several different pieces that were being solved, and there were clearly pieces of it that were better from one than from the other. It was not a clear, this is the only and obvious solution. So again, thank you for wrestling with that. I know this is not easy. And the final thing is a huge thank you to all of the principals. Every principal from every affected school was there and had clearly been deeply engaged with this committee. They were doing their best to represent their kids, to represent their communities. And some of them, I mean, there was at least one who was almost in tears about the fact that half of her PTA board was about to be shipped off to another school, which, if we can avoid doing that to that principal, I think that would be a good thing. But anyway, so the principals have been representing their communities quite well, and I know this is hard. I mean, honestly, this is never something you do for fun. This is something you do because you have to. Doing nothing is not an option. So again, thank you to all for the efforts that they have put into this so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of this play out.
And Dr. Holm, if you can remind me that we do have a study session for the boundary process, I believe at our first December meeting, correct? December 5th. So we will also be listening to the summary of that feedback along with the proposals that were put out, just so that you are aware that that is also happening. So Director Carlson jumped us right into board member and student rep comments, so we will just continue with that if by chance there are any other comments to be made. Shivani?
I'm not sure if this is kind of unrelated, but someone did talk about ICS Focus Week, and I just wanted to provide like a student perspective on that, because a lot of my friends went to ICS, and like one of the things that they really loved about it was Focus Week. So I do think there's ways to make it more equitable. I just wanted to provide that perspective.
Thank you. Evan?
On that note, I will be reaching out to ICS. I'm not going to go through all of this for time reasons. I'm going to keep it short. I just wanted to say that there's a couple things. One, our district, since it's the end of the fall sports season, we did incredibly well in athletics. Lake Washington girls volleyball went to state. Their swim and dive team went to state. From Juanita, cheers going to state. Boys cross country went to state with their coach getting 3A KingCo Coach of the Year for cross country. Their girls swim team also had members go to state. So we killed it in athletics. Lake Washington just hosted a multicultural family night on November 19th from 4 to 6 p.m., so big props to them for that. Juanita and Lake Washington will both be doing what's a tradition in a lot of our high schools, Winter Wishes, which is where students are able to submit things that they'd like to either see, like fun little things, or maybe they get a candy cane. So there's always some great student-to-student interactions there. Juanita just recognized and did a whole social media campaign about Transgender Awareness Week with their Gender and Sexuality Alliance, I believe, GSA. And then finally, I'm going to try during these, because we're still trying to figure out what this is going to look like, when possible, provide maybe an action, maybe not an action step is the right word, but something that might be not quite there as an issue yet, but something to consider. And for today, it's catalytic converter theft. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Perfect. It hasn't been a significant issue yet. I can tell you that particularly in high schools where kids have to leave their cars basically sitting in the same spot for 8 hours at a time, it is a bit of an anxiety inducer. And while it's not a significant issue yet, it's not something you want to become a significant issue because of impacts monetary issues, transportation. And so if you're looking for, and this is kind of what this is, things that kind of, from a district perspective, provide goodwill for students, because I want the students to like everyone here. There's a lot of things the district could do to start making it look like, hey, we care about this. Lake Washington Technical Institute and the local Kirkland PD did an etching event last summer, which reduces the likelihood of something getting stolen. So that's just something to consider for the future.
Thank you. Director Stewart?
Well, following up on the catalytic converter issue, I think, John, didn't you have some report regarding East Lake and the prevention of one by the staff, as I recall? It was staff and I believe the resource officer that
Yeah.
basically caught him in the act.
Yeah, I mean, to Evan's point, it is an issue. We've been affected by it here at the Resource Center. Eastlake High School had to go into a lockdown, and fortunately, staff put eyes on it. Well, staff put eyes on it, reported it. They went into lockdown so that they could address that. Resource officer was involved with that, but yeah, these are real issues, and it's quite impactful and very unfortunate.
Caught him red-handed.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, hearing none. Our next board meeting is actually scheduled for December 3rd, a Saturday. It will start at 8:30 and go to 3:30. We will be doing, that will be the board self-assessment, and then we will move into levy planning and parameters around that. There is more information available on the work plan. Then following that will be December 5th, that Monday, we'll have a study session. It's actually going to be beginning at 4 p.m. with the board meeting at 7 p.m. It is beginning at 4 p.m. due to the fact that we have added grading policy review onto that agenda, so along with the boundary process. So we wanted to make sure we had time. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Carlson, seconded by Director Choi to adjourn our meeting. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.